I do have a question about the time that you put Owen Farrell in his place at the training ground.
Drove his head into the ground.
Absolutely melted him.
Hello and welcome back to RugbyPass Offload with me, Christina Mahon. And today I'm joined by Mike Brown, Brian Wilson and Jamie Roberts. We'll also be joined a little bit later by England legend and Hall of Famer Maggie Alphonsi to preview the very exciting Super Saturday in the Women's Six Nations. Well, first, how are you guys doing?
Very well, thank you. You guys all right? All good. We got Brownie calling from his car. We can't quite see him, but I think we can hear him all right.
I think that's probably a good thing though, Doc, that you can't see my ugly mug. So you'll be happy with that.
Where are you, mate? Are you out to Newcastle already, or?
It's on the M5. It's on the M5.
I wouldn't be driving up there. I'll be first class in the plane. So no, I'm not. I'm just going heading into town.
You're not on your way back from Margot Wells, are you?
No, but she sends her best, Ryan. She does miss you.
What a legend!
Ryan, you did speed training.
Yeah, baby.
When he could run.
Yeah, exactly. That shows how slow I was. If I'm still slow now, Margot got me going. What a lady.
She got you a 50th cap, mate. Happy. I hope he gave you a 50th cap jersey.
Well, we're still waiting for it. I was wearing the wrong shirt, mate.
Oh,
were you?
24 hours before the game, I get pulled in. It was the wrong person's shirt. So they didn't have me watched. They didn't have me cap. Nothing. But hey, I'll get it. Don't you worry about that.
Yeah. Make sure you get it, pal.
Well, Mike, it is great to have you back. Now, I know a lot has changed since the last time you were on the show, and we are dying to chat about that. But before we get to it, you're currently in the form of your life, and Quins are now up to 4th place. So I suppose apart from Gustard's departure, what has changed at the club to spark such an incredible turnaround?
Yeah, look, it's probably one of a few things. I think the players have massively been empowered to sort of take ownership of things, and we're kind of, especially as a spine of a team and leadership group, trying to really take ownership and lead as much as possible, say how we want to play, say how we want to do things. I've never been in an environment where the players have taken this much ownership and responsibility on board. But the guys are really loving it. And I think the fact that we're allowed to have a massive say on how we want to play and how we want to do things means that, everything kind of falls on us, which gives us a sense of responsibility and makes us really want to go out there and perform, I guess. So I think that's the main thing, but we're just kind of sticking or trying to stick to what a lot of us have been brought up on at the club. Us academy guys or guys like Danny that have been at the club for so long. What we're really about as a club, Harlequins. Tempo, playing from anywhere. Counter attack, but also we do have another side to our game, which I guess people don't really notice. Is I think our game management has been really good. We're actually top of the kicking stats in the Premiership. So, we do try and have that all court game, and I think we're showing that at the moment.
Yeah, it's interesting you talk, Mike, about responsibility. Like when you look at the spine of your team, Baldwin's an international player. You look, Kerr, yourself, Esterhuizen is a Springbok. And when you sprinkle that in with youth, like, John March and Marcus Smith, all these young, exciting, especially back 5 players for you boys, a couple of young lads who are absolutely carbon. Don Brandt's been fantastic for you the last couple of years. It bodes really well. I've been really excited watching Quins this year. I think it's fantastic, just been immense. And you're right, it's playing the Quins way, like when I played at the club. Something we probably didn't quite do enough of. But you look like you're all having fun. When you talk about taking responsibility and empowerment, is that deciding the way you play? Or, because we all know coaches are there to facilitate players. The players ultimately the people who have to go on the pitch. But what exactly are the coaches doing? Talk us through how it works. What you meet on a Monday morning, you preview the opposition. How is everything working with the players?
Yeah, so look, it's literally everything from how we want to defend the maul to how we want to play in the game, to our moves, everything really. We're taking ownership of. Is
that the weekly plan as well, Mike?
Yeah, so how it works is we'll meet on usually a Monday if we're playing on a Saturday, and we played on a Saturday. We'll meet on a Monday as a spine team, so we call it a spine meeting. And like you said, it's It's the hooker, it's the line-out caller, our captain, our number 8, our 9, and 15, plus Andre as our defensive captain. So it's all those guys we'll meet, and it's myself, sorry, yeah. We'll all meet and we'll talk about the game that's just gone, any learnings that we want to take from it, and then how we want to move forward. And that's on the pitch and also off the pitch, the messages we want to put on the group, how we want to talk in the week, the environment we want to have, standards, all those sort of things we put on ourselves to really drive. So, for example, at the moment, we're really talking about Premiership winning standards in everything we do, from around our environment to on the pitch. So we're really pushing that because we're all desperate to make that top 4 and then go on and win it. You know, we're in a great position at the moment, but we're only going to do that if we have those standards in everything we do. So if we're just looking at the weekend, we didn't have those standards. We spoke about that in the sparring group. We didn't have those standards in the first, I'd say, 20 minutes against Worcester. You know, it was they score, we score, they score sort of thing going on. And if we want to win the Premiership, we're not going to be able to do that against people like Bristol and Exeter. So that's what we've been speaking about in everything we do this week. And that's kind of how it works, really. And yeah, like I said, the coaches kind of facilitate that and then adjust their sessions accordingly.
I think the biggest shock story in rugby this season was your announcement that you were leaving Harlequins. And after 16 years of service, we heard that you got your marching orders in a matter of minutes. So can you please talk us through what happened on that day?
Yeah, look, I kind of have to be a bit careful because obviously the club weren't too happy with what I said. Yeah, look, what happened is what I said. And there's a couple of reasons why I said it. Obviously, one was kind of hurt with how it happened, but two, also I want the club to learn so that things like this don't happen again. You know, there's going to be other guys that leave in the future, and you know, I feel like that there's a lot of learnings can be taken from my situation. I think it's important to do that. I think it's important for people to understand, you know, this isn't old school rugby anymore. And I think people on the outside just lean on the whole romantic side of rugby, you know, the loyalty, the respect, all those sort of values that I guess used to be a massive part of rugby, you know, back in the olden days. And I think people still lean on that when it's on the player, but when it's on other things like the clubs, it's just business. So I think it was important to me to get that across that, yeah, that's fine. It's a business, but you know, when a player does something to look after themselves, we can't then, you know, start going back to these romantic old school values of respect, loyalty. I take someone like Sink, for example, grew up through the academy, loved Quins, and he moved on, you know, to earn some good money somewhere else. I guess was a big factor of it, if we're all honest. And you know, you read loyalty and all that thing. Quins gave you the chance, all that sort of stuff. But it's a business at the end of the day, and it's got to work both sides for me. So if we're going to say it's a business, it's got to work both sides. We can't be then leaning on old school values and romantic values that we don't talk about. So it's important for me to sort of open people's eyes to that. And I think something like football, I think there's a better balance. You know, everyone knows where they stand. When rugby, I think it's still a bit old school in that regard, if I'm making any sense.
Can you?
So yeah, and I think for me as well, sorry to interrupt, I think, you know, look, everyone at some point gets moved along, but I think there's a way of doing it and a process of doing it, which I don't feel was done right in my situation.
And can you share, Mike, what the reason Gustard gave you for your dismissal was?
It was money.
Can we not call it that? Can we not call it dismissal? I think that's unfair.
What word would you prefer, Jamie?
Moved along.
Not that, Ryan. Not that one.
Moved along. He wasn't dismissed. He just wasn't offered you weren't offered the contract, Mike. You weren't offered to stay, were you? They just said thank you very much. Am I right? Or
yeah, and I think
they didn't lowball you.
No, that wasn't until later on. But
okay,
those sort of things I can't.
You can't.
Look,
you
can
really
listen. You can. I can't really go. I don't want to really go into too much detail because I don't want to tit for tat with the club, and I don't want that. You know, Laurie Dalrymple has come out and said what he said, which is fine. You know, he can do that like I did, but I'm not going to then start going back and forth. So you can listen to what he said.
So was it just like? Did it just feel like really just clinical? You know, because it's hard, isn't it? You've been at the club such a long time. You're kind of pillar of Harlequins. You know, certainly yourself, Rob Shaw, Danny. You know, these guys have been. You guys have been at the forefront of what Quins have all been about. The blood and soul of the club. Do you just feel that conversation was just like, cheers, mate, thanks? It was just uber clinical, and I guess that's what you're referring to when you say it needs to be done in a proper way.
Yeah, I think it's that. It's how it led to that meeting. There was other things that went on which didn't really sit well with me for the service I gave. You know, just things like having to chase for a long time. There was supposed to be a meeting with Guzzy before that, which didn't happen because for whatever reason, and then moved on to another day. And if it was that important to them, you know, it would have been moved. It would have been done then and there. You know,
I guess it's players. All you can. I can understand that, bro. Completely understand that. I guess as players, all you want is transparency, isn't it? I think, you know, we do as players. You understand it's a business. If you're going to get moved on, well, so be it. But tell me early so that I can make decisions. I can go looking at other clubs. Don't drag people along, especially someone like yourself who's given 16 years service to the club.
Well, Mike, for someone who gave 16 years to the club, the way they were handling it, did you almost get a sense that something was kind of up by the way they were treating you?
I kind of felt something towards the end of that restart season. Because I asked Longy, for example, Sean Long, he left obviously at the end of that season. And I asked him, is there something with the older lads? Because I'm kind of feeling something. For some reason, I'm quite good at reading situations and environments, and I could sense something with the coaches or with Guzzy. So I kind of felt something, but I never ever thought, you know, I thought I was playing well and my stats were showing that. I thought, you know, I'm doing good stuff around the club, and we've got a young back three with a lot of inexperience, and I'm helping those, you know, people like Lou Liner, who's come on massively. I've been sort of working with him, mentoring, and he's come out and said nice things, and he doesn't have to do that. But, you know, for him to say that, you know, is really nice of him. You know, all those things, you kind of think, oh, yeah, you know, maybe, you know, I think I'm going to be kept on. So to hear that in that meeting was a massive blow, you know, and then sort of to be left over the weekend with no one really to talk to apart from my wife, who's now stressed and upset and not really sure about our future, and my dad, who's, you know, the last time he was at the club was for a bar ceremony where he's hearing, you know, you always have a place at the club and all that sort of thing. I've got to deal with all that on my own. You know, it's tough, and I'm not saying that's for people to feel sorry for me and all that sort of stuff, but it just goes back to the processes I'm talking about. We have one of the best welfare liaison officers you could imagine, but he wasn't in that process for whatever reason. He didn't even know it was going to happen. Such a big meeting. You know, it's a big meeting for anyone, but for someone that's been there for their whole adult life for 17 years, that's a huge meeting. You need someone like that straight after the meeting to talk to check in on you, all those things. But whereas I was left for a whole weekend to process that, to deal with that with a young family, to speak to my dad who has no idea how to process that. Because, like I said, the last time he spoke to anyone at the club, he's hearing all these things at a bar ceremony. So, you know, I'm having to deal with all that. And then I come in on a Monday and, you know, I felt like embarrassed. I felt like, where do I fit in? What am I doing here? Like all those sort of things as a player, all those insecurities you feel, and you're like, I don't really know how to be in this environment anymore, because I don't feel like I've got any value, any worth. You have all those sort of things on top of you. So, you know, it's hard to explain, but that's kind of what was going on. And again, I'm not doing it. I'm not saying it for people to feel sorry for me. I'm not doing that at all, because there's people in much worse situations than I am. And there's, you know, people that don't get to say what's happened to them, don't have that platform to do that. You know, I'm lucky that I can speak to someone at the Daily Mail and get that out there. Yeah. And I'm lucky enough to have a job, and Dino, that's given me that kind of lifeline, I guess. So to continue playing at the age of 35. So, you know, I just wanted to let people know and make sure that people knew my side of the story, I guess.
And Mike, I know this is probably a bit of an awkward one, but when Gustard got fired, did Quins ever consider like going back on your dismissal and signing you again? Because you've been playing so well, like despite all the circumstances, you've been really like just on form.
Yeah. So no is the answer until a week before my Newcastle announcement. They came back with something.
You'd already signed the contract, big boy. You'd already signed the contract.
How did you feel then when they came back so late in the day? Like, you've signed with another club and then they offer you something. Was it a really good offer that would have potentially enticed you back, or were you just like, no, I'm done now?
A bit of both, really. As in, it wasn't good and I was done. But it's hard because when things like this happen, all that feelings you have for the club is kind of sucked out of you. You know, like I would argue that there's no one that has or had the feelings I had for Harlequins. You know, the love, the loyalty.
I was going to ask you that, Mike. How do you feel?
All that sort of...
Yeah, how do you feel now, a few weeks on, and how do you treat your daily life at the club now, and how do you feel emotionally when you go into games? Obviously, it'd be amazing to win the Premiership with the club now, but a few weeks on, and you can reflect, what are your emotions like now and your feelings towards the club?
Yeah, look, I think firstly for me, you know, I've got a job to do. I get paid very well to play rugby and be a professional, and I also hold myself to high standards. You know that about me, Doc. So I'm not going to let these sort of situations impact that. So I'll continue to do that. But also I feel like I have a massive job to do for the guys around me in terms of the players, because I want them to be able to feel what it feels like to lift that trophy at the end of the season. And like I said, we're in a great position. So whatever I can do to allow them to have that chance, I'm going to do. And also for the supporters, you know, especially the ones that have always backed me, the ones that send me such nice messages now, I want them to, after a tough period, especially in the COVID times, I want them to be celebrating at the end of the season. So
I think mate, that for me, that's the mark of the man right there. You know, like, you've had all this crap from the club, you've done everything you can, and you know, you get screwed over by them, but you're still there. You want to do well for the fans, you want to do well for the players, you know, that are there already. And I know when you get a low ball offer after that, the easy option is maybe to take it. But like you said, mate, you've got plenty more in you to give. So why not go and give that to another club and try another challenge? So that's what sometimes I think the coaches miss is, and definitely the people above the coaches, the guys in the higher up positions that don't see the everyday stuff you do with the younger players, with the culture around the club. And it's people like you in clubs that drive that culture. And I think that's one thing you never want to lose in rugby. You don't want to lose that type of thing. So, mate, more for Newcastle. I think let them have you, and then they'll get the benefits out of that, I'm sure.
Yeah,
I'll second that, mate.
I appreciate that, guys. No, I really do. Means a lot, especially coming from you two guys. But yeah, look, now I've got my head around everything, and you know, like I said, Dino gave me a lifeline. Like, I'm really, really excited about going up there. You know, obviously nervous because it's like going to a new school, and like I said, my whole adult life has been spent at one club. But I'm really looking forward to joining that environment, because from what I'm hearing, you know, they're a really close bunch of lads, really tough, resilient bunch of lads.
Northern grit, mate. Northern grit.
That's it. Yeah. So I want to come and add to that, and I will also think. I can imagine some people will think I'm crazy, but you know, why can't they go and, you know, achieve things and win things as a group? I'm looking at the toughness and resilience that they have as a squad, the spine of their team, and I'm thinking, you know, they could really add some history to that club that they've already got. You know, back in Johnny Wilkinson days, they won didn't they? They won the trophy. So why can't we go and add to that? And that's what I'm looking forward to add into their group. Hopefully add into their group and see where we can take things.
Only 2 hours from Glasgow, mate, if you want to nip up for a beer.
There you go.
That's it. Yeah, that's a great invite. So, yeah. No,
and Mike, it's been interesting because I think social media for a change kind of came to your defense. They were defending your honor, and one in particular was from Mike Phillips. Did you see his tweet?
Yeah, it was kind of a nice one, but then a little dig at the same time.
Shut the knife in there, didn't it?
Oh, stop. I was actually surprised he shared a picture of someone other than himself in the tweet. So that blew my mind. But like, did that now, I suppose over the last while, like it has been really tough, but did that bring a little bit of a smile to your face, Mike?
Oh, of course, you got to laugh about those sort of things, haven't you?
I think a young Mike Brown wouldn't have laughed at that. I think you would have reacted differently, but that's the mark of you. I think you've changed.
Do you reckon? Yeah, maybe. I think, I think going through these sort of things, you do kind of change anyway. You know, going through the heartache of not making a World Cup, going through this sort of thing with Quins does change you. But yeah, you got to laugh at you. And, you know, he's a funny character, and I've not really met him off the field, so it'd be funny one day to meet, especially after that little dig. But yeah.
I don't think I'll just change you, mate. I think it'll be the making of it, and I wish you the very best in Newcastle. I really do. I think you're right. A good group up there. You could win some silverware.
We will let you go, and thanks for coming on again for a quick chat with us. Best of luck for the rest of the season, and for next year in Newcastle. So thanks again, Mike.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me, and take care, everyone.
Cheers, Brad.
Good luck, mate.
Cheers, guys. Bye.
So we are now delighted to be joined by Maggie the Machine MBE, who's one of the most successful rugby players in the history of the sport, to preview an incredibly exciting Super Saturday for the Women's Six Nations. So welcome to the show, Maggie.
Hello, welcome. It's great to be part of the show.
I have to say now, I am absolutely delighted to finally have another woman on to even out the panel. So I'm really happy you could join us today.
It's always good to get like more female power.
Absolutely. Ryan is feeling a little bit nervous because right now you're outnumbered because Jamie isn't on.
Jamie, can you hurry up? Get back.
Where has Jamie gone to? Is it Amazon? I bet it's Amazon knocking at his door.
Yeah, that's it. He's gone to answer the door to get his Amazon delivery.
Don't mind the podcast. It's fine.
And everyone knows Amazon don't actually stand at the door. They just knock and run. So.
Yeah, you're right. You all right, Jane?
Yeah, all good. Maggie, how are you?
How are you doing, Jamie? You're all right.
Yeah, very well, thank you.
Who was at the door? Was it Amazon? We want to know.
Yes,
I take back the Amazon comment now.
Jamie, I was just saying when you were off there dealing with your issue at the door that I finally have another female on this panel. We are even for a change. I'm loving this. But look, Maggie,
she's got a bit more rugby nous than you.
Well, that wouldn't be hard.
How do you take this banter? Honestly, I don't know how you do it.
Well, she dishes it out, Maggie, I tell you.
It's a special skill. Maggie, my rugby history started and finished within 2 minutes on, I played tag in the office. I was dragged onto the pitch and I was so bad. They were like, can you please leave? And I was like, no problem. So at least, you can talk to us about rugby. So look, going into the final round of the Six Nations this Saturday, can you give our listeners a summary of how incredible the tournament has been so far?
Yeah, it's been really entertaining. I think initially going into the tournament, I wasn't quite sure what to expect because obviously it's supposed to take place over the men's same Six Nations window. It got delayed due to obviously COVID and many of the players haven't been playing lots of rugby, especially those who aren't part of the Allianz Premier 15s. But it's been really entertaining rugby. There has been some big scores. As expected, England, their professional side, they've got players who play in the Premier 15s. They've got players who are incredibly fit, and they have stormed away. So in Pool A, they've topped Pool A, and in Pool A there's also Italy and Scotland. And then in Pool B, there's Wales, France and Ireland. And last weekend, it was sort of a battle out for who's going to, top Pool B. And that was between, obviously, Ireland and France. And France won that one. So it's been some really good rugby. And I'm so looking forward to Super Saturday. The big final between England and France, it's going to be interesting because they have battled it out many times, and most recently England has won. But anything can happen on Super Saturday. We all know what it's like, especially with the Six Nations. Anything can happen on the last fixture.
Absolutely. And I suppose, yeah, you just touched off it there. It's England and France. They're both unbeaten. So who have you got your money on to take home that trophy?
You can't ask me that question. You know, I used to play for England. I guess I'm supposed to say England. But I actually think it's going to be a really close one. So the last 2 tests that England and France played was in the autumn. So it was in November. And those 2 tests, England won. But the last one was really close. And I think it went down to pretty much some final decisions, you know, some referee decisions, which I think were quite key. And, you know, the French missed out. So the French are very good at having a really good fast start. They sometimes can take the lead. But what happens is sometimes their discipline can affect them. So as a result of that, few penalties, couple of yellow cards, and all of a sudden the game changes momentum and England gets the upper hand. England have got lots of, you know, good talented players. So Emily Scarrett is a good example, but England are without, you know, a player who's recently retired, Kate Daly-McLean, and they've got some nice players coming through like Helena Rowland. So I just think it's going to be a physical contest. England love to have a good physical defence against the French. We all know what the French are like, you know, big physical players who love to carry the ball hard, regardless of the gender. So that's what I think it's going to be like. It's going to be a competitive game, but it's, you know, I know it sounds very cliche, but it's going to be 80 minutes. It has to be 80 minutes of rugby because I've seen it. You know, I've seen France lose the game in the last 10 minutes. So, you know, whoever can really sustain that level of pressure, I think will definitely obtain that win.
And just before we move on to your incredible career, I suppose just in terms of the tournament so far, who actually has kind of stood out for you and impressed you the most?
Yeah, I think it's Wales. Do you know what? I do you know, Wales have really, you know, they've had some tough fixtures, and the scores have been really quite big. And the player who stood up for me for the Welsh team, anyway, is their captain, Lily Crapp. She's brilliant, you know, and especially the last game that she played in, picked up an injury. Wales had used all their subs, so she had to stay on for an extra 20 minutes. So hopefully she hasn't picked up any further injuries as a result of that. But, you know, when you talk about leaders, you know, Jamie Roberts is a proper leader. You know, when you talk about leaders, she's one of them, someone who just keeps going for a team. But I do think Wales have had a real tough tournament, and I hope after this that they get further support and continue to keep pushing on as a team. So, yeah, other players...
The Wales-Scotland this weekend?
It is, yes.
It is, isn't it? And
yeah, Wales, Scotland.
Effectively for the wooden spoon.
I guess to an extent, yeah. Because the format is so different though. So the format is so different. It's hard to really say because there's no Grand Slam. There's no. So I guess you say they are fighting out for the wooden spoon, but yeah, yes and no. Is that the best way of answering your question? I'm so sorry, Ryan. I'm really.
Sorry, I distracted you from answering the original question, mate. I just wanted to hear the lowdown on Wales. That's the most important thing.
Do you know, so in terms of like players to watch out for, so for France, there's Brujan. She's brilliant, a winger who's been on fire. She's always been a talented winger, but she's someone who she scored a hat-trick in her first match against Wales in round 1, and then scored 2 tries in the second round third round against Ireland. Boulard is another one who's plays 15 for France. So I think come on to potentially a third cap and has already scored a load of tries. So she's flying. Depending who they go as their other winger, a lady called Barnett. She's been playing really well. Scored 2 tries in the last game. And then for England, players to watch out for, Poppy Cleal. I imagine she'll probably be starting in. She's got a twin sister called Bryony Cleal, so I have to always say their whole name. She's a big strong ball carrier, got player of the match in round 1. So someone I would suggest watching out for. Another player, Emily Scarrett, you can't ignore her. She's talented in everything she does. World Player of the Year last season. So yeah, there's just a few. Another player, Megan Jones, if she's starting, I don't know, not quite sure yet, but she'd be one to watch out for. One who's trying to earn her spot at 12, and Jessica Breach as well probably is, I'd say, another one. I could probably reel them all off, but there's a lot of players to watch out for. It should be a really entertaining fixture.
Well, that's great. It's great that you can list out so many players, because I suppose, like, you know, you've been involved in the game for 15 years plus now. So, like, how impressed have you been by the increasing standards in the Six Nations?
God, you make me feel really old. I think 15 years. Do you know, when I first came into the Six Nations, I'd be honest, it was very much quite amateurish. And look, the teams that stood out were England and France. To be honest, actually, it was really the French. The French won it all the time. No team could really compete. And over time, things have become much more professional. So teams have got better strength and conditioning, have got more professional support in terms of, just anything, strength and conditioning, medical support, just the professional kit that we wear. We've now got sponsors. We never had that before. And the venues that we play at are much better. And over time, that's improved. And the broadcasting as well, it's either been on pay-to-view TV, so Sky Sports, in England anyway, and then obviously we're seeing it on BBC. The final's going to be BBC Two. So there's been so much progress, and as a result of that, you see that the standard of rugby is really good. We've still got a long way to go, though, and I like to say it's at a really good place right now. But to make sure that we have the Six Nations be brilliant, we want to make sure that the gap between nations reduces. Like we say with the men's, we want that gap between Italy and the rest of the nations to be much better, much smaller. It's the same in the women's game. Actually, Italy are pretty good in the women's game, but we want, teams like Wales, Scotland, we want those gaps to continue to reduce and for every match to be a competitive match.
Yeah, because I was just going to say, I was pretty surprised to see how well Italy were doing, because I suppose when you do look at the men's Six Nations, there is always that chat about, oh, well, should we kick Italy out or not? So it's interesting to see that the women are doing quite well in it. So
it does make you think, though, because if we mimic the men at the moment. So if you kick Italy out in regards to the men, we don't want to see the Italy in the women's game get kicked out, because actually they're quite good. So does that have an impact on us? Should we continue to copy the men? Should we do something different? And that's the big discussion at the moment in the women's game. Should we do it in a different window? Should we change our format completely? Why do we copy the men? So that's a discussion now we're having right now.
You kicked Scotland out before Wales, wouldn't you?
I wouldn't kick any team out. I'll be honest. I know what you're trying to do, Jamie. You're trying to get me to say it, but I wouldn't kick any team out. I just want to. Honestly, our global game needs to continually get better, and it's great to see like England women professional, the French are like semi-professional. But actually, for the women's game to get really good, like we see in the men's, we've got to see professionalism across the board, and more support, investment, sponsorship, you name it.
Yeah, especially the global calendar. I think that's going to play a big part. And I love the fact that we finally had a standalone Six Nations for the women. It was just, so long may that continue, and long may we see other tournaments start to develop where it is at a separate time, and it's not at a competing time to a men's game. And anyway. Yeah,
so, Christina, can I jump on that? Maggie, I saw you made comments about a women's British and Irish Lions team a few weeks back. Like, how cool is that? Like, when do you think that'll take shape?
Well, at the moment,
within a couple of years? Is it 5 years down the line? What are we talking?
Do you know what? There's no time frame on it at the moment. So Royal London are going to be doing a feasibility study to see if it will be feasible to actually do it. And to see whether, do we follow a similar format to what obviously the men have? Because at the moment, obviously, you guys play South Africa, New Zealand, Australia. In the women's game, South Africa and Australia aren't necessarily as strong as a New Zealand side. So would we potentially play against maybe a USA side, a Canada side, a French side? I don't know. So there's a discussion around that. And also, is it every 4 years, or is it something different? So I think it can definitely happen. We've got a Barbarians women's side, which at one stage no one thought that would happen, and it has happened. So in anything, never say never. I think it will. It's just when. I think, obviously we'll miss the window coming up, but I'd love to see it in the next few years. And I'd love it to happen maybe a New Zealand tour. So New Zealand, but you guys have already done New Zealand, so it's going to be a long time to wait, really. But I don't know. I'd love to imagine having that for a woman or a girl to have that aspiration to think, I could one day wear the red jersey, not the Welsh one, the red one with, the Lions. That's such a... It'd be cool to have for a young girl to have that same aspiration. Yeah, totally. Well, Maggie, so fingers crossed.
Just on that, so say if you had to select a starting 15 match for the Lions this summer for women, who would you pick? And also now, here's another one for you. Can the likes of Ireland and Scotland and say Wales compete for a place in that squad with the teams who are training the 5-6 days a week in a professional capacity?
You think, I think, yes, I do think other nations could compete for a spot on that Lions team, especially from what we've seen from the Six Nations. There has been some good players from all those nations who have stood out. I do think if this Lions does happen, there'll be greater investment, you'd like to think, for all the unions to ensure that they can support this, because it wouldn't be great to have a Lions tour, Lions team, and it for not to be successful. So I imagine there'll be greater investment in that. Who would make my starting 15? I'll be honest, I couldn't reel off everyone's name right now, but I'll think of a few off the top of my head. So Emily Scarrett, because you can't ignore her. She's good at everything, and it's one of those players who you hate, you're just good at everything. She's one of them. So she'd be starting in my team, and she'd probably be captain as well. I would have the likes of, actually from Wales, I'd have like a Jasmine Joyce. So she's a really good sevens player, absolute gas, and someone who would quite easily work with many different players, because she especially plays in the sevens world and on the GB side. I would have from, I'm just trying to think, other nations. So I'd say from like Scotland, I'd have Emma Wassell. She's a good second row, dominant in that area, is a good leader as well. And then from England, I'll pull out another one, Poppy Cleal, really real key player. And then maybe a Marley Packer, who's a number 7, aggressive, got a real dogged edge to her. So there's a few players. There's probably many more, but right now I think off the top of my head, I'd probably say them. And I'd like to think that I would be like the team manager. Just,
I was going to say, Alphonsi team manager.
Yeah, just running out of a bottle every now and again, and just with my flip flops. So yeah, who knows?
Oh, it would be really exciting to see something like that. I suppose the story behind your rise to the top of the sport is fascinating, because you had to overcome both physical and structural hurdles. So can you give us a bit of an insight into the hardest battles that you faced on your way to the top?
Yeah, so I guess my first battle was that when I was born. So when I was born with a physical disability called clubfoot. So it's where one or both your feet are turned in. So my right foot was turned in. And when I was born, I had an operation to straighten my foot. But it was quite a challenging time, because I had to kind of go in and out of hospital quite a lot when I was young to get my foot really corrected. So even when I run now, you could see I've got a bit of a limp, and when I walk, I've got a bit of a limp. And actually, if I'm in London, it looks quite cool that I've got a limp. If I'm everywhere else, people are like, "Why have you got a limp?" So yeah, I've got a bit of a, my foot wasn't great when I was born, and obviously got corrected. So that's kind of like my first battle. And then my second battle was probably at school. So at school, I was a difficult child, didn't really necessarily engage with the content at school. And actually what changed my life was a Welsh PE teacher. So I went to a really rough school, I'd say, in North London, and rugby was not existent. You don't talk about rugby. It was basically football. You either supported Arsenal or Tottenham, and that was it, really. But I remember, because my behaviour was quite bad, I used to get put on these school reports where you could almost get excluded from school. And one day in my life changed because of my PE teacher. She, her name was called Lisa Burgess. She's actually on the Welsh Rugby Union. She's in the Hall of Famer, and she is on their board, I think now, first female to be on the board. And she came into school with black eyes and bruises, and I was like, "Miss, what do you do?" And she's like, "I play a sport called rugby union." And I was like, "Wow, what is a sport? What is this sport? I've never heard of it." And she was like, "Do you know what, Maggie? You should go to your local rugby club and just try it out and give it a go." And my local rugby club was Saracens. So I went down to Saracens, and they had a women's section and a young girl section. I just fell in love with the sport, It was the only sport I can do. I could be aggressive and be really physical and not get in trouble for it. So I was like, I'm going to really excel here. And then, that was sort of my biggest battle, sort of like overcoming, first the adversity, and then sort of like, I guess, physical challenges with my attitude as well at school. And that sort of, those were the sort of my main big barriers. And I guess then being a female in a sport that's really male dominated, that was another barrier. And I've always said, and I still say it to this day, like, for me, rugby is genderless and it's colourless. It's a sport, and I absolutely love the sport. And for me, there may have been barriers, but I just did my very best to not acknowledge them. And regardless of my skin colour or regardless of my gender, was going to make it. And what's great now is that I was very fortunate to make it, and now there's many more out there. There's loads of people playing the sport, and it's one of the sports which I truly believe is a sport for all. Love it, so those are probably my sort of like hurdles along my career.
That's amazing. And now you touched off Saracens there, and I do have a question about the time that you put Owen Farrell in his place at the training grounds. So can you please tell me how that came about?
Yeah, so he might say something different, but so basically as part of the England setup, the England women's setup, a few of us got the opportunity to train at the boys' academy. So I was at Saracens, and I got the chance to train over a period of time at the Saracens men's or boys' academy, whatever. I don't know what the terminology is at the moment right now. But And in the academy was the likes of Owen Farrell, Jamie George, George Cruz. So it's basically all the players who obviously gone to play for England were there at the time. So at the time, Owen Farrell, had this sort of like Justin Bieber quiff. And I remember this one session in particular that I attended, and Eddie Jones was the director of rugby at the time. And every now and again, he would come and do a session with the academy boys. And this one random session, he came and did this, he took the session, and they asked, like, is it okay for Maggie to still be, because I was the only woman at the time, or female at the time, who was at the session. And so, is it okay for Maggie to join? They're like, yeah. He was like, it's fine, as long as she does everything they do. So tackle, whatever it is, she's got to do it. If she doesn't want to do it, she can go. I was like, absolutely fine, I'm ready to do this. And it was a full-on session as well. And I remember it was, I think we were doing like just a normal sort of, it was like a game scenario, maybe like 5v3. And all he had to do was pass the ball. So it was just like passing down the line. But he definitely targeted him, worked for me. And I was like, right, I can't not tackle him. It's going to be bad for my reputation. So I made a hit on him. I mean, some people might have exaggerated and said it's gone. I took him right back and dunked him and all that. But I believe it.
I believe in this story.
I drove his head into the ground.
Absolutely melted him.
I made an effective tackle that stopped him in his tracks. I mean, there was a really good session. It was one of those ones where you kind of don't acknowledge it, you just kind of get on with it. But I do remember at the time, because it was Andy Farrell was obviously one of the coaches there. His dad, and I can't remember, there's a few other sort of player coaches, and I just remember when I made the tackle, they were like, in the corner, like, oh my god, she just tackled him. So yeah, that was one of these moments will live forever in my head, but maybe in his is kind of completely gone. But yeah, I think from what I remember, he was a good sport. He didn't really do anything. He was like, yeah, good tackle sort of thing. So yeah, a story that I will tell my grandkids.
Oh, that's a class story. Oh,
awesome.
That is awesome.
I actually remember when I was younger, I trained with like the London Irish. There's like a gold academy group. And I remember the England ladies were training at the back and we trained against them. And
no way.
Yeah, and you know what blokes are like. They're like, oh, as it is, oh no, like we've got to go easy. And I remember them absolutely melting the boys, and it was brilliant. And like everyone was, we're all the academy players. Yeah. But they were going for it, and fair play to them. And that's what, when you said that, when they get, well, if you're involved, you've got to be involved.
Do it.
You've got to do everything.
Totally.
I absolutely love that. I think they should do more of that.
Do you know what? It's one of those things where you kind of go, you have two options. You either make a tackle or you just sort of stand off. And especially in that environment, I knew, Eddie Jones, wow, he's like, God, going to look great in front of him. I didn't get selected for his England team or anything like that after that, but it just, just think to yourself, you've got to go for it. And especially with some of the lads, like you said, if you don't do it, they sort of think, oh, she shouldn't be here. So you have to always prove your point. But I enjoyed the sessions, always enjoyed those sessions.
I only think that integrating the women and men's at stuff like that will be helpful for everyone as well within the game. Like, did I see recently the GB7 stuff? The men and women's were training together. I saw a lot of stuff because a few of the boys up here were down with the GB7s and they were, practicing the restart stuff with them and doing a lot of stuff in the GB7s. Have you come across that?
Yeah, so I guess throughout my career, there's been various different sessions where we've basically trained with the men or maybe like a top level academy setup. Naturally, so you've got to manage it because some of the guys are absolutely huge. So there's certain things that you'll do together where it might be, you might do work in the line out, because line out is it's very much about movement. It's about reading your calls. That's sort of what we'll do. Or we might do scrummaging stuff, but again, the weight ratio is obviously quite different there. But we'll do things where it's about tactical moves and how can we outplay an opponent. And I've been part of the 7 setup, and we've done a lot of work against academy boys. And actually, a lot of the work has been around, again, it's not necessarily tackling, it's more around technical stuff. Can we beat them in certain moves? And it's really made a big difference. And vice versa for them. Like, they've kind of gone, okay, right, we need to work on our skills. So it's always been good, but naturally, so you have to manage certain aspects because physically there are obviously differences. And
I bet the determination for you girls when you go in those things are like, right, come on, let's do these boys.
Do you know what? There has been sessions where, I mean, like I said, I like to reserve my big physical hits for the game because that's where the best place is. But the people who I used to sort of, players who I know would definitely go for it regardless of gender is Heather Fisher. So she's a brilliant player, fantastic athlete, and is part of the Great Britain Sevens side, and was not long ago on I think SAS. Are You Tough Enough? She was one of the celebrities on there, and she actually got down to the final, but unfortunately didn't make it further because of the bit they did at the end. But she's an absolute monster. So I think I make big tackles, but she, regardless of gender, she cuts people in half. She's amazing.
Oh, good.
How do you reckon Ryan would fare up against Heather?
Oh, I don't know. Right, show me arms. Give me a bit of this.
Don't ask him about his arms.
Team polls over it.
Are you hiding some melons underneath there? What's going on, eh?
I'm the lightest international number 8 ever going.
Do you know what? I love the fact that if I put you and Heather together, I think it's different strengths. That's all it is. Like, I think you.
You'd batter me, I reckon.
She's got a little bit of step in.
That was the polite way. Yeah, Maggie was trying to get around it, but yeah, Ryan, I think you've just nailed it there. She'll take you. But Maggie, there's been big money deals for the likes of women's football and cricket in the UK over the last while. So do you think that we'll see one for the women's rugby in the coming years?
Never say never. You know, there was a stage where you probably were watching women's football and you go, oh, the money's not there. I don't think there'll be any big, massive transfer deals or big contracts. And now look at the women's game. It's brilliant. Like women's football, some of the contracts are huge. So I do think in the women's game in rugby, it will happen in the future. It's just not there yet. We've now moved to a stage, especially over here in England, that players are being paid to play, especially those in the professional setup, especially those who are England players. So there is contracts there which are happening, which used to be very novel when I was playing. It was very much I paid to play rather than I wasn't being paid to play. So it's so different now, which is great. I do think it will happen. It just won't happen anytime soon. I'd love to say it will. You've got to have the right sponsors, the right backers. You've got to have the right owners as well at certain rugby clubs who's willing to pay that much money. But it will happen, just not now at the moment.
Yeah. Are you happy with the trajectory the women's game is on?
I think
if you could change it, would you set the women's game on a different path in any other way?
Do you know, so look, I'm part of the IFB Council, so one of the things that we constantly are talking about is always like we're talking about the competition structure for adult men, and same for the women as well. How do we ensure that we keep bringing talent through the system? And for me, the setup for the women in England is I like to think is pretty good. To have this Premier 15s, which has very good teams. There's still some big scores, like you see in the men's Premiership. There's going to be between the bottom and the top. There's always going to be those slight differences, but it's improving. And I think if we can continue to ensure that funds are invested in those clubs, I think also what's helped in the England Premiership is the fact that women's clubs are combined with men's clubs. So, for example, Saracens women are combined with Saracens men. WAS, etc. That helps when you've got that support as well, because then you can tap into like the same coaches that the men have. That makes such a big difference, and the resources and the facilities is huge. So, in terms of changes that I would make, for me, it's broadcasting. I'd definitely add that. When you make something visible, people go, right, I want to sponsor it. I want to put my investment in it. How can we continue to make these women household names? So a lot of the games are streamed, but how do we get it, on free to air or pay to view? That's going to be big for the women's game. So that's one thing I would improve. And then I'd want other nations to improve their domestic games, because I think that's where it's great that, we've got international teams performing okay, but really, it starts, as you all know, it starts at the grassroots level. So we need to find ways of supporting and investing, the domestic game in Wales, Scotland, Ireland, across the board. Really, that's what will bring the standard of women's rugby globally up.
Awesome.
Just a quick one on the NFL. So they've actually been brilliant at introducing women's coaches into the men's game. So do you think that there are still maybe a few barriers in introducing women's coaches into the men's rugby?
So, do you know, Giselle Mather, she's a director of rugby at WAS Women's. She used to actually coach the London Irish Academy boys men's setup over there. And I think she's one of she's a level 4 coach, so she's very much up there, knows her stuff. And I haven't necessarily seen that recently. I haven't seen any other women crossover. Doesn't mean it won't happen. I just think what you need players to retire and then get their qualifications, and then they move over to work in the men's and the women's game. I think at the moment we need to get more women working in the women's game as well. You know, we've actually got a lot of men who coach all the international teams, as you'll see. But France, to my knowledge, are the only ones who have a female head coach. So we need to, I think the key thing for us is just how do we get more women coaching at the top level, like get the level 4s, working in all different aspects of the game, you know, academies, you name it. I think if we can do that, then I think we'll have an influx of women across, regardless of gender, as long as you know what you're talking about, that's the key bit. And there are players out there who are getting their level 4s, is to see whether they want to transfer into the men's game or whatever it may be. So the future is there. We just need to see more people coming through, like we've seen in refereeing. You know, we've got now a few women who are refereeing in the men's and women's game. You know, Joy Neville is a good example. Holly Davidson is another one as well. Joy Neville was the TMO for during the men's Six Nations. So it's happening.
You can see that it's only a natural progression, because the era of women's rugby now is obviously at its highest, it's at its biggest ever. So those players, as they go, will naturally progress into coaching. So you'll see that develop. And like you said, it's happened with the women's game. We had Holly in today, actually, at the first session, doing a little bit of refereeing for just our training sessions.
Yeah.
And I've said it on here before. Honestly, Holly and Joy are two of the best refs I've come across. And they naturally, for some reason, demand more respect. And players are like more respectful of them because they're women. And, you know, whether that's right or wrong, I think they demand that respect from the players, and they get it. And I think what you'll see is, as I've seen a lot of people say, if you can see it, you can be it, with the women's game. So a lot of kids nowadays, it's crazy, the grassroots rugby for girls playing rugby. I mean, I remember back in the day when I played when I was a youngster, there was always that one girl on the other team. And now I think it's definitely progressing, and you're getting full teams of girls playing now. So it's a natural progression, isn't it? And it will happen, and the quicker it happens, the better for women's rugby and rugby overall.
And look, Maggie, before we let you go, can you please remind our listeners where they can watch this incredibly exciting day of rugby this Saturday?
Yeah, so the final, so the England-France match is going to be live on BBC Two. To my knowledge, I can't remember all the other. You can watch it on RTE. So off the top of my head, that's what it's going to be, basically BBC Two to watch the England France match, and then the other two fixtures you can watch on BBC iPlayer. But it will be covered, so you can see it. There's lots of information. Basically follow Women Six Nations on Twitter, and you'll find all the information you need to know there. But I would encourage as many followers to watch it, because it's going to be some cracking rugby over that day.
Absolutely.
Maggie, how about the big game, Wales or Scotland?
Oh, the big game. So you can watch, that's going to be a BBC iPlayer. Who do I think is going to win? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
So, do you know what? I think Scotland have looked pretty good. Like, they did test England. They scored a try against England, which is quite rare to do. And they had a pretty good fixture against Italy. So I'm going to say Scotland. I know you don't want to hear it. I'm going to say Scotland. But, and don't worry, I hope Lily Crap isn't injured, because she's key to them. So I'm rooting for both teams. I just want to see a good game. That's all I want to see. But I probably would say Scotland might edge it on that one.
That game's up at our ground this weekend, isn't it? Up at
Scotland.
Oh
yeah, yes, it is. You're right. Yeah, it will be a good game. It will be a good game. I think all of the matchups are fair matchups. So I think it potentially could be a close one.
All right. Well, look, Maggie, on that note, we will let you go. But thank you so much for coming on to the show.
No worries at all. Thank you again.
Cheers, Maggie.
Thank you.
Cheers, Maggie.
Bye.
Bye. And that is it from us. Thanks to Maggie Alphonsi, Mike Brown, Ryan Wilson and Jamie Roberts. And thanks to you for listening. More offloading next week. So make sure to subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts, so you'll get it as soon as it's released. Leave us a rating and review if you can. And don't forget to check us out on YouTube as well. Thanks, guys.